All right, we're all ready? Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining our press gavel. We'll start with everyone that is in our room here, and then we will go to everyone in our virtual audience. So the first person, if we're all set, we're going to hear from Kevin Dugan from AM New York.
Hi, good afternoon, both of you. I wanted to ask a little bit more information about the AirTrain review that you mentioned, Rick Halton. Could you explain or say who the outside expert is, and just go into a little bit more detail, if possible, what you'll be looking, or what they will be looking into, what the Port Authority hasn't already examined in all the previous reviews? Like, what will be new about this review that we don't already know?
So, as I said during the meeting, we are at the beginning. We're planning the review. We intend to do it as expeditiously as possible. We intend to do it as carefully and thoroughly as possible. We intend, as we said in our public statement, to consult with outside experts and with shareholders. But at this point, we're in the planning process.
And I guess just to kind of zero in on something, like, do you think there's any chance the Port Authority will go back to the drawing board and not do the AirTrain, do some of the alternatives that have been proposed at this point?
Well, as I said, we intend to carry out a very thorough review. We intend to do it expeditiously, but at this point, we're at the beginning of the planning process.
Thank you. Next question is from Jeff Yappalatter from Airport Voice.
No, actually, thank you very much. I just came here to watch the proceedings. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you for that, Jeff.
All right. Always good to see you.
Thank you.
Next, we're going to go to our virtual audience, so we'll make sure that everybody is ready to go. And the first person that we're going to hear from is Danielle Dunn from Politico.
Hi, I wanted to follow up with you folks about a report released by a watchdog group recently, which claims that the Port Authority used a fast-tracked process to approve the Amazon cargo service deal. And I'll just quote from it real briefly. It says, quote, "The Port Authority Board likely violated its open meetings policy and transparency resolution by failing to include the Amazon deal on its initial public agenda and by not allowing any public comments on it." So any response to that?
Well, the Port Authority has a very clear, long-established, and very carefully formulated bid process, procurement process. This was a public procurement. It was fully advertised in terms of the warehouse cargo space. There were 3 bids, and the selection committee, which consisted of professional Port Authority experts, made its selection, and what we announced was the selection, which was a normal procurement announcement, and the board approved it. So there was nothing unusual from the point of view of the procedure, and as I said, it was advertised and carried out in accordance with the Port Authority's procurement regulations.
And let me add some color to that. You know, this watchdog uses the word likely violated, pretty highly charged and suggestive words, which I don't think are substantiated. And we have gone through a very rigorous process here. It seems to me there's obviously an anti-Amazon bent to this, but I'm going to turn to our general counsel and answer directly. Did we likely violate the Open Public Meetings Act or any of those things that were just charged?
No, we did not.
Okay, next question.
All right, next we're going to go to Karen Yee from WNYC.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for taking my question. So just to follow up on Danielle, will there be any additional opportunity for the public to weigh in? I mean, many people are concerned in particular about the environmental impact of the Amazon cargo deal.
Well, the procurement has concluded. I think if you take a step back in terms of the setting of the Amazon deal, this is a cargo operation that will take place on Port Authority property in a warehouse. The Port Authority has the highest minimum wage. Airport requirements are certainly close to the highest in the country. Each state has passed separate legislation which requires employers on the airport to provide health care benefits in different ways. The Port Authority has a wide variety of safety and other requirements. All of those will be enforced with respect to the operation. So that is the framework into which Amazon is coming. There's a requirement that they enter into what's called a PLA, a project labor agreement, so that to the extent they do construction activity, it will all be done by union labor. There's a provision which requires them to engage with unions that wish to represent their employees. So that is the overall framework. But let me come back to what I said at the beginning. This was a competitive procurement. Those competitive procurements are prescribed by Port Authority regulations, and this one was carried out consistent with those regulations.
All right, next we're going to hear from Carl Campanile from New York Post.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Cotton?
Yes.
About the LaGuardia AirTrain project.
Carl, you're cutting in and out just a little bit.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Do you still believe in the LaGuardia AirTrain project, if that's the best way forward? Do you believe that? Do you still believe in the project?
Well, the framework is what I said at the meeting and what I said at the beginning of this question and answer. Governor Hochul asked the Port Authority to carry out a careful and thorough study of alternatives. That is what we intend to do. We intend to do it expeditiously, and we intend to do it rigorously. As I said before, we will consult with outside experts, and we will consult with stakeholders. That is how we will proceed. We will do as high a quality job as we possibly can. We're in the planning process, so we're at the beginning, but we will, as I said, carry out the study both expeditiously and at a very high standard of quality.
Do you think it's still a viable project, or do you think it's dead? The AirTrain.
I think what I said was we're going to carry out a study. We will identify and report back to the governor exactly what she asked for, and we will proceed from there.
Thank you. Next question we'll hear is from Larry Higgs from Star Ledger. Larry, if you can hear us, it's your turn for a question.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can, Larry.
Okay, great. I have two questions. One is regarding the Amazon lease report. In that report, it questions the lack of opportunity for the public to comment, as it was a last-minute budget add-on on August 5th, not necessarily the procurement process. The question is, will the Port Authority allow the public another opportunity to comment, and how will the Port Authority respond to some of the concerns that have been raised by speakers in September and at some demonstrations in Newark?
Hey, Larry, it's Kevin. So listen, there's an opportunity for the public to comment at each of our meetings. We had one such comment today. This is a free, open, meeting. They can literally submit their questions, and when we're back to going live, obviously come back to the Port Authority monthly meetings and have those questions brought before us. And beyond that, if individuals have individual questions, listen, Rick and I have an open door and an open line. Feel free to call.
Okay, I have a follow-up question, different topic. Regarding the ports, what is the strategy for the port to keep goods moving so there's an assurance that merchandise is on the shelves in stores for this holiday season?
Well, so the supply lines are very complicated, but our focus is on our port. And what we have done from the point of view of being clear as to what the situation is at our port is that you will find on the Port Authority website refreshed every single day the names and number of ships that are at anchorage. If you go there today, you will find that there is one ship, one container ship, Northern Discovery, for those of you who are interested, which is at Anchorage. It has been at Anchorage for a little over a day and a half. It is expected to come into the port either the end of the day today or tomorrow. It will also reports the weekly, for each week, the average waiting time that ships experience during that week. In general, that has ranged, that average time has been around a day and a half or 2 days for the Port of New York and New Jersey. So as per the report that our director of the port, Sam Ruda, summarized at the meeting, the port has deployed a whole set of techniques to avoid congestion. It's not to say that supply lines there are other friction points, but in terms of our top goal, which is to avoid our port, to avoid the Port of New York and New Jersey contributing to supply line problems, the Port Department has so far, and we expect it to continue, been extraordinarily successful. Sam outlined the strategies which has enabled the port to stay free from congestion. It is everything from working very closely with all of the employers at the port to assure that the workers at the port are healthy. There's been excellent cooperation. The ILA, the employers, so there has not been any labor issue at the port. The marine terminals have extended gate hours as needed, both later in the day and on weekends. There's been excellent cooperation between the railroads who pick up many of these containers for shipment into the middle of the country, both in terms of exchange of information, letting them know the volume of cargo containers that is expected, and they have been metering out the flow so that there is no gridlock, there's no backup. They've also worked very hard with the port in terms of supply of rail cars, multiple other strategies. But the bottom line, and it is there for everyone to see, go to the website. As of today, there is one ship at anchor.
Thank you. Next question is from Zach Griff from the Point Sky.
Thanks, everyone. One quick question. As the agency that oversees our region's airports, I'm curious as to why the airport restaurants and lounges in both LaGuardia and JFK aren't enforcing the city's vaccine mandate for indoor dining.
The airports are quite unique in terms of their physical infrastructure. They range from floor-to-ceiling windows and ceiling heights, 50, 60 feet and above. There are grab-and-go facilities, so each concession faces a very different physical infrastructure. We have provided the relevant regulations to each of the concessions, and each location really will be, it's an individual matter in terms of how those regulations should be applied. And we have provided those regulations to the concessionaires.
And whose job is it to enforce those regulations?
Well, I don't think it's a matter of really which agency. It is a matter of interpreting the regulations, and as I say, we've provided those to each of the individual concessionaires.
Okay, the next person we're going to hear from is Brian Paskus from Cranes. We'll give Brian a second to unmute himself. Brian, if you hear us, you're welcome to ask your question.
Yes, I was going to ask about the LaGuardia Air Train, but it seems, my questions have been asked and I'm getting the same response, so I'm okay.
Thanks, Brian. Moving on to Eve Kessler from Streets Blog. Eve, if you're able to unmute yourself, you can ask your question now. Okay, Eve, we'll come back to you. The next person that we have a question from is Dave Porter from AP.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon. Back to the LaGuardia Air Train again. This is sort of a process question. If you're obviously going to be looking at a lot of alternatives that have been looked at previously, and maybe even some new ones. But let's say that it's agreed upon that you're going to do something different than the rail line that you previously approved. Does that not start the process again where you need to do an environmental impact statement? You've got to get a new record of decision. Is that correct?
Well, what we're going to do right now is do the study, and we will cross all future bridges when we get to them. So what we're doing at the moment is focusing on Governor Hochul's request. As I've said, we intend to carry out the review expeditiously. We intend to carry it out thoroughly. And once the review is completed and submitted to the governor, we will go from there.
And just very quickly, I'm sorry, you may have gone over this before, and I apologize if you did, but when do you hope to get that finished by the review and communicated to the governor? Well,
at this point, we haven't set a time frame. As I keep saying, we intend to do it as expeditiously as possible, but until we get a bit further in the planning process so that we can structure what amount of time each phase of the study will take, I'm reluctant to put a specific time frame around it other than to say we want to do it as expeditiously as we can, but we're also cognizant of the need to do a top-notch job, which we are totally committed to doing.
All right, thank you. Last call for Eve Kessler. And just New York 1, I'm not sure if you guys have a question. Okay. I think we can close up. If anybody has any questions, you can reach out to press@panyj.gov. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.